Now, Rocco is supposed to be introducing you, but he's not here. Do you need an introduction?
No.
Okay, so obviously Arthur's doing the presentation this week about his trip to the Galapagos Islands. When was it, Arthur?
Oh, this was many years ago.
Oh, okay.
And yes, so, but it's still okay. I looked at it.
Okay, all right. So everybody welcome Arthur to do his presentation. Okay, it's all yours, Arthur.
I'll share. Oh, you see it?
Yeah.
There, okay.
That's good, thank you.
Okay, it's this is a trip we took a few years ago. Galapagos, a paradise for naturalists. We took with a friend of ours, my wife and this friend. And before I start, I'd like to tell a little story. Some Canadians went to hell, and these Canadians got together, and they're having a great time, barbecuing and having a good time. And the devil was really astonished and went down and asked these guys, what in the Sam Hill is going on here? And they said, we come from a very cold country, so we are enjoying the warmth. So we are having a barbecue and beer, and it's great. And the devil was totally distraught, went and checked the thermostat, turned it all the way down to make it as cold as possible. So I'll teach these guys a lesson. So he goes back, and these Canadians are enjoying themselves, cheering and drinking beer. And the devil said, what are you doing now? He says, don't you see it? Hell has frozen over. The leaves won the Stanley Cup.
Oh.
Okay, that. Well, you know, Galapagos, one of the things that you see is it's full of sea lions. It's an animal that's omnipresent all over. Now, our trip consisted of leaving Sault Ste. Marie to Toronto to Miami. And then from Miami, we flew to Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador. And from Quito, we flew down to the main island of Santa Cruz. That's where the international airport is. And from there, we took a boat. This group of islands, the Galapagos Islands, they're fairly young. They were exposed, they came out of this volcanic activity 3 to 5 million years ago. Now, if you look at the dinosaurs, the peak dinosaur event occurred in 145 million years ago. So this is way after the dinosaurs disappeared. In context, you can see the age of the Earth is 4.543 billion years. So when you look at that, these islands are fairly young. Now, one of the things about these islands is that the Humboldt Current, which comes from the Antarctic down the west coast of South America, brings in very rich, nutrient-rich water from the Antarctic. So the sea is full of plankton and rich food source for all kinds of animals. So the animals are very well represented in these islands. One of the main things that you know about this place is Charles Darwin spent 5 weeks in 1835 in the Galapagos, traveling by this famous boat HMS Beagle. Now we started our cruise in Santa Cruz Island, and then we took a boat, and our first stop was San Cristobal. From there, we went around. The second stop was Bartholomew. From Bartholomew, we went to Rabida, and Rabida, we went to the largest island, Isabella. From Isabella, we went to Fernandina, and then Fernandina, we went to North Seymour, and then came back all the way to Santa Cruz and took our return flight. Now, if you look at it, the equator cuts across the Galapagos Islands, and we crisscross the island, the equator, 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the last day when we were coming back, we had a grand party. In the boat usually, we had about 25 people in the boat. It's fairly small. And there was a small band that used to play at night. We used to sort of, after dinner, have a little dance and have a few drinks. It was just very pleasant. And the whole thing we became a very close-knit family of 25. We all knew each other. On the last day when we had this party, it was a real bang-up party. We had a fancy dress competition, in addition to the usual dinner dance. So that was on the last night. Now, when we landed in Quito, we had the 3 of us. A good friend of ours, Janina, a dear friend and a colleague. She is the immunologist in my lab, and she got her doctorate from Max Planck Institute. And my wife, Sarsi, she's a math graduate, and she had a master's in library science from Wisconsin. So all 3 of us are professionals, and we had a great time together. And we knew each other very well in the zoo. Quito it's about 9,350 feet above sea level. So you have a chance of getting this high altitude sickness. Both Sarsi and I were spared. We didn't get anything, but Yanina got hit with this high altitude sickness. This is when the brain there's edema of the brain. Why it happens is because of the high altitude, the oxygen level is low, and we don't have sufficient red blood cells to process the oxygen. So, but after a few days, the body adapts and makes more red blood cells, and then we are able to process more oxygen and people come to normal. Otherwise, you have to take a diuretic. But Yanina was okay after a day. Now, in terms of this, in Lhasa, which is about 11,000 or really 12,000 feet above sea level, most of the people get high altitude sickness. And when Sarsi and I were there, Sarsi got high altitude sickness and she had to take a diuretic to get out of it. And this makes one person very weak and very slow to walk. So when we got off the airport in Quito, we saw Yanina kind of moving slow. Then I said, Yanina, is anything wrong? She said, I'm fine. But she was kind of slow motion all the time. And then after a night's rest at the hotel in Quito, she was back to normal. Now we landed in Santa Cruz Harbor and to catch our boat. And there you'll find that the sea lions occupy all the boats. They love to go and sleep on all the boats. They take over the whole place. And sometimes they even sink some boats because too many of them climb on in these boats. Our rooms are fairly small, quite Spartan, but quite comfortable. We even had a little mini deck which we could come out and see. The boat would travel at night time. The daytime, it will sort of anchor near the island and we'll go on a trip down to the island. We had 2 types of landing. A wet landing, if we could land in the ocean, where we'll all wear our swimming suits and we'll jump into the water and go to the land. Or dry landing, if there's a dock, then we can sort of walk across and go on the dry landing. So this is the little boat that we had. Our first landing was our excursion to San Cristobal from Santa Cruz. You can see the boat there, and we have just landed, and there's my wife standing there. And we had our backpacks. This was a dry landing because there was a dock. Now, one of the things that you see in San Cristobal is the marine iguana. This marine iguana is all over the place. And of course, when you go to this island, you cannot go by yourself. You have to have a guide. There is an Ecuadorian guide who takes you and tells you the footpath that you should take. Because these things are all over the place. And you can even step on them because they are not scared of any person walking around. And they lay eggs all over the show. So they ask us to be very, very careful. And these are the only iguanas that can swim in the ocean, and they feed on the algae and they go down at the bottom. One of the things that they do is they consume quite a bit of seawater along with the algae that they feed. And then in the nose, they have a gland, the salt gland, which sort of isolates the salt. And they sort of sneeze the salt out. You can see all of them standing there and sneezing, shaking their head and sneezing. And you can see all the salt squirting out. There's a kind of a crab that you find all over the shore. It's called Sally Lightfoot. No relation to Gordon Lightfoot, I mean. And this is also called the red rock crab, and it's all over the coast. It has a symbiotic relationship with the marine iguana. It eats the dead skin and parasites from the iguana, and the iguana gets exfoliated. So the crab gets the food, and the iguana gets clean. These crabs are very fast, and they sort of vanish very fast because some of the marine seabirds pick on them so they can, run a dot across and hide. And they have, their legs have little spurs on them, and they can hold on. The waves don't seem to affect them. They don't get washed off very easily. They have very well adapted to living among the rocks. Sea lions are all over the show. Here you have some sea lions. And the female sea lions are very friendly. You can go very close. We are asked not to touch any of the animals. Although we can go very close, we are asked not to touch. When we swim in the ocean, and for the sea lions, they come and smell your leg. It looks as if somebody is touching you with a big bottle brush because of all the facial thing they have, the whiskers. And also they try to swim in between your legs. So they're very close. When we first landed and put all our backpacks on the beach, they all came out of the water and they would come to the backpacks and they were smelling the backpack to see what it is all about. So they're extremely friendly and very nice. But the males are not so friendly. The males honk and they look after the females, and we are told that they bite. So they said don't go close to the males. And you can very easily identify the males because they have a big sort of a hunk on their head, and they also make this honking sound. Now you see there's lots of young ones here. Here we have some newborn sea lions close to the rocks, and you can almost reach and touch them, but you're not supposed to. Here on the beach you have the sea lions, and here's a male that's sort of guarding his harem. He honks and bites, and a lot of these other males, they fight to retain their harem, and they go and hide, and they have a bachelor group. They come and hide in the bush, and when this male is not, when his male is sleeping or looking the other side, they try and sneak and try to get at some of the females. That's a sort of a constant battle between the bachelor group and the master sea lion. One of the islands that we see is Bartholomew, and you can see how volcanic it is. It's very, very barren, and you have all these, barren mountains all over the shore. Some islands are so mountainous. The Isabella is the largest island, and this had a problem with goats introduced by sailors. Apparently, the sailors bring in these goats and let them loose. They figured that these things can multiply, and then when they go on their voyage, they can stop by, pick up a few goats, and take it into the boat as a source of food. But they had multiplied so much, and they were sort of eating the bark of many of the trees and killing the trees, and also they were eating the eggs of some of the turtles. So this became a nuisance. So the Ecuadorian government had a bounty on these goats, and they were trying to kill them. But the moment they hear a shot, all these goats went and hid somewhere so they couldn't get at them. So somebody came up with a great idea. So they got a goat, tied the goat to a tree, and this goat was sort of bleating, and this would sort of make all the other goats come around. And then when they all gathered around, these guys would go and shoot the goats. And they called this goat that they had as a bait goat that they tied to the tree as the Judas goat. So it was a Judas goat strategy. One of the common birds that you see they are the boobies of Galapagos. There are various kinds of boobies. There are the blue-footed boobies, the Nazca booby, which has got sort of grayish legs, and the red-footed booby. Now, the red-footed booby is a strange animal because it nests on trees. Even though it has got webbed feet, it goes and builds a nest on the trees, and that's where it sort of brings its young ones. Whereas the blue-footed ones are at the ground level. And when we go there, we can walk in between, and they would have it on the footpath next to us, all the nests of these blue-footed boobies, and the young ones will stretch their neck and try to reach and touch us. They were so close to us. The blue-footed ones have a distinct courtship dance. They sort of dance around before they mate, and they lay 2 eggs. The Nazca booby has got a strange sort of a thing that it is by design. It lays 2 eggs, and the first one that hatches kills the sibling by design, and it sort of gets all the attention for the one that survives. And this is a process that takes place on all Nazca booby nests. There's another common bird that you see. It's a frigate bird, and when it flies, you can see it's got a sort of a forked tail that is very distinct. Here the males have a gular pouch which is red, and it inflates this gular pouch to attract the attention of the female. These are very carnivorous birds, and they sort of fly around all over the shore. You can see them. Now there are lots of fish. One of the common sights that you see is the hammer-headed shark. And they see schools of them. You know, when we were staying in Isabella, we could stand on the hillside and look down on the ocean, and you can see great numbers of these hammer-headed sharks swimming around. This hammerhead is called a cephalofoil, and this cephalofoil or hammerhead is used to pin down the stingray, his favorite food. The hammerhead is not too much of a threat to humans, because its mouth is fairly small and it feeds mostly on stingrays. The Galapagos giant tortoise is something that you find in the main island of Santa Cruz, and this lives for 100 years. And this was a severely threatened species because the sailors used to take these things on board the ship for meat, and they could sort of keep them there for a long time. So most of them were taken for food, and apparently they are extremely tasty, and they were almost wiped out. Now they have they're very well protected, and in the Darwin Institute, which is on the Santa Cruz Island, they have a breeding program for these endangered species. They have these things live for 100 years, and the eggs take about 4 to 8 months to hatch, and the young ones, the eggs are laid in the sand, and the young ones take about a couple of years before they reach the full size, and then they live on for a very long time. They are quite a common sight in this main island. There is a small bird called the Darwin Finch. It's just like any old finch, but this finch, because of the island, it has sort of adapted itself to various kinds of eating food. Like most of them eat the seeds and the little berries, but some of them are gone down to like woodpeckers. They can make holes on the trees and feed on insect larvae. Some of them can go and drink honey from flowers. Some of them feed on the ground level on things that they find on the ground. So to do this, they have adapted the beak. So Darwin, he collected a lot of these finches to find the variation. And one of his hallmarks of his theory was based on the variability, how these things develop all these various adaptations depending on what kind of food they eat. Now, there are various adaptations to various things that happen in nature, but this was one of the cornerstone of his theory of evolution. There is even one finch that apparently goes and drinks blood from other birds. It slowly goes and pecks on the side so that it starts bleeding, and it feeds on the blood. They are called vampire finch. The Galapagos also has its own penguins, the Galapagos penguin. It's a warm water penguin. You do find these warm water penguins in Australia, also in South Africa, and in the Galapagos. Now, when we were swimming in the water, we could see these penguins swimming right in front of us. They're also not scared of human beings, so they come very close and you can see them. There is a theory now that say that the penguins originally evolved as a warm water bird, and then later on they migrated to the Arctic. So the Arctic penguins they evolved from the warm water penguins that started near the equator. The cormorants on the Galapagos are strange because they don't have any predators. There's plenty of fish. They have this flightless cormorants. You find that their wings are not very well developed, fairly small, and they never fly. So they build nests at the ground level. There's one interesting thing that these things do. When the females have their young ones, the moment the young hatch, they allow the males to take over looking after, the young one, and they go and hook up with another male very quickly. The albatross is the largest living bird in the world. It has a wingspan of 12 feet or 3.7 meters, and it can fly up to 10,000 miles without landing by something called dynamic soaring. Now, they just non-stop, they can go on gliding and gliding forever. They pair for life. It was made famous by Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where there is Mariner, he tells the story of his exploits, and he says a wedding guest stood still to listen to his story, and he goes on about this albatross guiding them to safety, and then he kills the albatross with an arrow, and then they are followed by all kinds of misfortune in their trip. So that's a very famous poem by Coleridge. Now this was the last day of our trip, and now we entered this big party on the last day of our trip. And this party we had, we were all given garbage bags. That's the only one you could use to dress yourself, and anything else you can lay your hands on the boat. And then you can dress yourself, and we had this big fancy dress competition. And my wife forced me to enter into this competition, although I was very shy. So I ended up drinking about half a bottle of rum before I could pick up enough courage to go and face the band. And then we did go. We ended up, and we got first prize. And as soon as we went in, the band started playing a sort of a jungle rhythm, we went around. So that was a nice finish to a great trip. Now, Charles Darwin was a naturalist on board the HMS Beagle on its 5-year voyage, and he spent 5 weeks in the Galapagos Islands in 1835, which inspired him to write The Origin of Species, which has revolutionized our understanding of evolution by natural selection. What he basically said was, in nature, animals breed, exponentially. So there is tremendous numbers being developed. And also there's variability. There's all types of variation that you see. So in addition to this abundance of the animals being propagated with the variability, and then the fittest survive. And this is, he called natural selection. In other words, nature selects the ones that are the fittest, the ones that can adapt best to the surrounding conditions. And that is how all the species evolved. Now, this was done in 1835. Those days, they didn't have any idea about the DNA or the basic building blocks of nature. Now we know that DNA is a fundamental building block. This is common from bacteria to plants to animals to everything. And you can see how from the DNA, you can see how the DNA is changed to produce all kinds of changes. And so this theory of evolution now, it's no more a theory, it's a sort of an established fact. But there are still people, the creationists to this day, who still question evolution. That you've seen it in Texas, where they have the school board has always a big fight about whether we should teach evolution or theory of special creation. They have this problem. And his theory was all based on some of the observations that Darwin made, and mainly on the finches. And here I have a group of these finches with a beak adaptation to the type of food they were consuming. Thank you. Now, if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Arthur.
Hey, Arthur, I have a question.
Yes.
About you mentioned at the very beginning that they blow out the
marine iguana.
The iguana, yeah. Are they the same iguanas you get up in Mexico, or are they a different type of iguana?
They're a different type of iguana, but they're all related. They have the same sort of basic iguana. Yeah, very similar. But these things are adapted to your marine life. So they look a little different. They look more dinosaurish than the iguana that you find in Mexico.
Question. Are the goats the only ones that were introduced by sailors, etc.?
Well, goats are intentionally introduced. Unintentionally, there are a lot of rats that escaped. So they have sort of, they are there too. But you don't find any snakes, no. The only animals, some of the animals that have come, you don't see too many predators, so they are predator free. So they are sort of, that's why they're not afraid of anything.
Arthur, I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
Darwin took 24 years to write his book.
Yes.
And did he, I guess he's still trying to write the one about the guy in the short black skirt?
What's it again? I don't get it.
Your skirt.
My skirt was made by my wife. She made it from the little plastic bag that we got. And I had a Q-tip under my nose.
I was wondering what that was.
That's a Q-tip. And then I took all the swizzle sticks and made a sort of a garland around my neck.
Very creative.
So we had quite a few swizzle sticks.
You have to drink them first, I guess.
Yes.
Sorry, Basil, go ahead.
Arthur, that's the first time we've met your wife, Sasi.
Oh, okay.
All these years, you were supposed to bring out a meeting, and she had asthma, so you couldn't.
I don't know. She somehow, I told her so many times, to come on over to the meeting. You will enjoy the meeting. She was quite active with the Rotary Club when I was in Sault Ste. Marie. But this time she sort of became quite an introvert. Normally she's not.
So now we know that your children didn't get their looks from you.
Oh, low blow.
I'd like to thank Arthur, please, and you're on mute.
Yes, fellow Rotarian President, thank you very much for this opportunity. Arthur, it's really interesting for this particular presentation. I particularly enjoyed it because I have not had a good story about animals for a very long time. And one of my taking from it is this bird you call the Albatross, which can fly miles and miles. When you mentioned it, my mind went into the eagle, how far eagle can fly. And this became a very great challenge in the world of birds. So I thank you on behalf of Rotary Club for this presentation. I think it's an intriguing one to every one of us, and we appreciated it, and thank you once again very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arthur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.